Chapter 13 of The Mandalorian might be the most hyped up episode of the series since the premiere. Rumors of Ahsoka Tano appearing have been floating around for months, and her name drop back in Chapter 11 made it all but inevitable. I myself was curious and excited and a little anxious to see how she would translate to live action, what she would mean for the story of The Mandalorian, and more. Now the episode is here, and Ahsoka has been revealed. So, what did I think? Honestly, I wasn't crazy about it. The opening of the episode was really solid, with Ahsoka running through the forest, picking off enemies with her white lightsabers. I love that they're still around with the same hilts and everything from Star Wars Rebels. Appearing and disappearing into the fog was just awesome. Hearing her theme sneak its way into the music here and there was great, but a lot of it just fell flat for me. Some of the potential avenues for the future of the show are really neat, but some of them I find to be worrisome. Of course, this is all just how I'm feeling, my opinion. I woke up to a bunch of enthusiastic texts and tweets from people saying they can't wait to hear what I have to say, and I've seen plenty of people very excited for this episode. Do not let me ruin your fun. My opinion shouldn't affect yours, but let's get into this. I liked the overall feel of the planet Corvus, a dead forest planet. I got some serious Avatar: The Last Airbender vibes, which makes sense because Dave Filoni worked on that series too. But this world definitely feels out of balance. The people are suffering, but the reveal that the magistrate is living in a lush environment felt a lot like Ba Sing Se. I thought the setup of pitting Din against Ahsoka was really great. I kinda thought it would go nowhere, but I wish it had. I think it definitely shows some growth on his part, not even thinking about trading the Beskar for her life, but I think it would have been more interesting to see him actually struggle with that decision even a little bit. The first encounter with Ahsoka was pretty cool. We see an owl in the trees that might be Morai, but I doubt it. It looks like a normal owl to me. I was surprised to see Beskar straight up block Ahsoka's lightsabers, but it's a reveal that I love. It lines up perfectly with the idea that Mandalorians created many of their weapons and technology to combat the Jedi of old. It makes them more formidable, and it makes me excited for the idea that Gideon's Dark Trooper army could be made of Beskar as well. That makes them straight up terrifying. But once Ahsoka and Din and Grogu meet up, that's where the episode started to lose me a bit. And it does kinda start with the name. I don't know, there's been so much secrecy surrounding the child. I think it's one of those things that once we start getting answers, they don't feel as interesting as the unknown. It's not something I've been speculating on. I had zero expectations surrounding his past or his name, but once I heard it, I was like, oh, okay then. And the name thing is nitpicky. I don't mind the name. That just takes getting used to. I more think it's weird that he was literally part of the Jedi Order. It makes sense. I'm not arguing that it doesn't. He is 50 after all. I just liked it more when he was literally just a random baby disconnected from everything else. And this has been a worry of mine since Ahsoka was rumored to appear. I love that The Mandalorian has, so far, been very much its own thing. Yeah, some familiar elements or characters popped up here or there. Season 2 has been doing that a lot, but it's been working. Cobb Vanth and Bo-Katan were in the show specifically to challenge Din personally and cause him to grow. I didn't feel that as much with Ahsoka. I did really like her reasoning for not training Grogu, straight up saying she has seen attachments bring down even the best Jedi. I also thought the little force testing scene was good, trying to get him to move rocks around, but ultimately it's Din and their connection that leads him to prove himself. And I would say she winds up challenging the overall quest by not taking the baby. I never thought there was a chance she would, and then the rest of the series would just be Din off on his own, but she at least lets him think she will for a night, and he offers to help take down the magistrate with her. And going into that, I don't know, I just didn't feel the stakes. I didn't know what was going on with the people or the planet. There's some oblique reference to this woman, Morgan Elsbeth, helping construct the Imperial Navy, and some hints that she's still working on that. The larger galactic stakes are there, but it would have been nice to know a little more from the actual citizens on the ground. Maybe get some focus on that one dude who was featured a handful of times or something. Unfortunately, that whole sequence was what fell flat the most for me. I think that largely came down to direction. Dave is still learning, and I would say this episode is a major improvement over last season's The Gunslinger, but it wasn't really doing it for me. Even Michael Biehn, who I love, just felt off. And then Ahsoka finally gets this information she's been after, and we don't know the answer, but she asks for the location of Grand Admiral Thrawn. And I tell you, I had the same reaction to hearing that name as I did hearing the Emperor laugh in the Rise of Skywalker trailer. A gasp of excitement, and then immediately going, oh, wait a second. The idea of seeing live-action Thrawn is enticing, and like Bo-Katan or Cobb Vanth or even Ahsoka, I never expected it would happen, especially looking back as a kid reading those books back in the 90s, but I also worry that the show is going to become overly connected. It's very possible this whole episode could be teasing the rumored Rebels sequel series and nothing more. Or maybe we're building to Thrawn actually being in The Mandalorian. Elsbeth seems like she's been making ships for him. Maybe Gideon is serving him as well, I don't know. But those teases do not excite me. It's taking this series and driving it further down the rabbit hole of what we already know. Like I said, I love that The Mandalorian just gets to be its own thing. It has its own characters and they're running around on their own adventures, and maybe there aren't galactic stakes, but the personal stakes have always been huge. The connections were limited but made sense when they happened, and they never overshadowed the main story. With the Jedi, I fear The Mandalorian is in danger of slipping into being overly connected with everything else. Some people are very into that idea. Again, I'm not trying to say that's wrong, it's just my opinion that this series works best with some separation. And there are so many dangling threads now. We're tying in very strongly with the animated series, which is cool and mostly makes sense to me, but I find it a little odd that we could potentially wind up seeing the follow-up to Star Wars Rebels here. And The Siege introduced the idea that we might get some setup to something like Snoke. I wouldn't mind more context for the Empire's transition into the First Order, but I also don't think The Mandalorian is the place for it. The Tython mention at the end of the episode was cool to me at first. I love the idea of heading to an ancient Jedi temple for answers and to let Grogu choose his own path. But now there feels like there's a major chance Luke Skywalker could show up, and I just don't want that. We just finished the Skywalker saga, and I was pretty underwhelmed by its conclusion. So the thought of The Mandalorian setting up this very interesting story with great characters only to turn around and eventually say, "Just kidding, it's been about the Skywalkers this whole time too," that idea doesn't excite me either. The more The Mandalorian connects with other properties, the more questions it promises to answer. That brings more and more emotional baggage and expectation. The more separated it is, the easier it is to just enjoy the ride. A lot of my feelings right now are coming from anxiety of what might happen, so just to focus in on what did happen and the episode itself for a second, I still feel like Chapter 13 was more about setting up those new questions and teasing new stuff rather than advancing Din's emotional story. Despite their nice little goodbye scene together, I was surprised at how insistent he was to give up Grogu at the end. But he also doesn't fight back at all when Ahsoka's like, "No, take him to Tython," and I like that. I'm glad that we're going back to just the two of them on the ship on a quest. And that is one of the great things about this show and its episodic structure. Sometimes an episode will pop up that I don't love, and okay, it is what it is. Next week will probably bring me something completely different that I will hopefully like more. This season has been mostly knocking it out of the park for me. Also, I should point out that I've only watched this episode once. I bet it'll sit better with me on a rewatch. The Jedi has weirdly felt almost like the experience of watching a Star Wars movie. We get years to speculate and wonder about the movies, and it can be hard to leave all that at the door on your first viewing. I've been actively trying not to speculate at all about The Mandalorian, but still, we've known about Ahsoka for months. Even if I'm not thinking about plot, there is an emotional connection with that character that makes it a little harder for me to just switch off and engage with whatever story is actually being told to me. And I'd also like to point out that a lot of my worries and anxieties are straight up coming from a selfish place. A lot of Star Wars fans probably met Ahsoka Tano for the very first time today. A lot of Star Wars fans probably heard the name Grand Admiral Thrawn for the very first time today. And that's awesome. I hope it encourages people to dive into the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, the books, and maybe more. And that's all I really have to say right now. We're going to be back tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern to stream with Pink Milk Podcast and discuss the Jedi further. And one last time, just a reminder that my opinion shouldn't sway yours. I've seen so many people thrilled about this episode, and I am glad. I hope I wind up looking back on it, seeing how wrong I was and how unfounded my fears were. And honestly, this series so far has given me more reason to expect that than anything else. So let me know what you thought of the episode down in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and consider checking out our Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.